Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's our pleasure to have with us tonight our regular guest and all-around savant and observer of human condition, Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Greetings.
I hope you're loaded for bear to make all kinds of erudite comments tonight.
I'm going to try. You can tell I'm a little casual tonight. It's finals week, so I'm having to cut some corners here and there.
There could be, I've often, considered, a political career for either of us, but I think maybe more germane worry would be Hollywood out there. Possibly there's someone out there watching the show in Asia that we'll get a call. Maybe we should flash our number up here where they could
we could do
call.
that.
We could do that. Yes,
but not in front of the camera.
I've
floated some of my books out in Hollywood, but I haven't gotten good enough.
Yeah.
I've gotten a couple of offers, but not good enough.
Not
good enough to
beware
justify.
Of being, the powers of Hollywood being what they are. And you being a young boy here in the big city, that you could be suborned and corrupted by the experience.
Well, that's what they try to do. They lowball us hicks here in the South.
And I wouldn't put up with that.
Well, I don't know if you remember a project of Ben Porter and Buck Melton Sr. known as FilmWorks, when they got fleeced pretty badly by the people out on the coast who figured that we were not sophisticated enough.
And
here.
in fact, was that the case?
It crashed and burned. Yeah. So.
Well, just be careful with the occasional $5 bill that comes your way.
Yes.
Well, having passed that warning along, maybe we could talk about issues. One thing that seems to getting a lot of attention almost every night up on a conservative news channel is the southwestern border. And what exactly is going on there, and how did that come to pass? And there's a big, differing opinion as far as the Democratic pundits and people that are in charge of the situation. They say everything is well in hand. And of course, the Republicans and their supporters every night show some people swimming across the Rio Grande. Firstly, what's really going on, and how did we come to this situation?
Well, I would say, as a preliminary remark on what you said, I don't think it is Democrats and Republicans, because I think what you see regarding the southern border is very much like what you see and what you have seen for about 25 or 30 years now with Social Security. The party out of power screams that there must be Social Security reform. And of course, what they want is reform in a direction that would favor their party. But as soon as they come into power, they shut up about Social Security reform, and the party that is now newly out of power starts saying Social Security reform. It's the third rail. Nobody wants to touch it.
Are you sure that's the issue here? I've been remembering the Trump administration. I think they clamped down on the border, or tried to, and I guess you could say, well, the Democrats, I don't know if they particularly criticized them. Maybe they did. They said, well, your children are being put in cages or whatever.
Oh, yes. Well,
maybe so, but
I would say
they didn't. They said, well, maybe you're mishandling it, but they didn't really, say we need to have an open border. They didn't. Do we have one? And that's the question to ask.
Fundamentally, it's very largely open for reasons I'll try to get around to later.
Yes.
But essentially, the Democrats like a lot of this immigration because first-generation American immigrants have traditionally voted Democrat. The Republicans are in favor of the open border because these illegal immigrants can work under the table for very low wages. Which helps big business, and they do the scut work that a lot of people here in the United States will not deign to do for themselves. And that's my lead into where we start. I want to be very clear about this. We are a nation of immigrants. Everybody here came here or was brought here from somewhere else, unless you're full-blooded tribal.
And even they came from another country. They did. 10 or 12,000 years.
Yeah,
well, 15,000 is
yes.
right. I mean, there's a debate, but
yes. But they were since they were the first. I'll give them that. But so I'm not down on immigration. The thing that I do worry about is that for most of our history, the history of immigration to North America, to the United States, you left behind a lot of the things that you were trying to get away from, be that religious oppression or bad ideology or entrenched social structures like titled nobility. And as you got here, crossing the Atlantic was a great cleansing agent. And so you would start, as Thomas Paine said in Common Sense, to make the world anew. And we develop or bring with us a lot of good things like republicanism, public virtue, some degree of egalitarianism, at the very least equality of opportunity. And over time, newcomers get socialized into this thing called the American civil religion. Now, if you compare this to what is going on in Central America and especially Mexico, point number one, they're not coming from across 3,000 miles of ocean. They're coming across a southwestern river that is barely deserving of the name. And therefore, they can maintain very close contact with the culture from which they came. And number two, this mass migration is happening at a time of modern technology and modern travel and modern transportation and modern communications. So it's very easy for them to keep in contact with that culture, with family who are back home. With the bottom line is they are not being socialized into the American mainstream as well. They are changing America more than they are being changed by it. And they are bringing problems with them, drug culture, cartels. I think every state in Mexico right now is under the State Department watch list as being of concern or downright dangerous. So that's the situation. Yes, it's immigration, but it's a different type of immigration on a scale and of a type that we've never seen before.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways that we could take our discussion. There are a lot of issues that this brings up, and I'll start with this. Is that and this gets into the whole concept of a nation state, or what is a nation? So if a nation state it has inside its borders, it has its laws, it has its rules. And one of the things that makes a nation state is maybe excluding other people from coming in. So they have immigration policies, and if you go around the world, generally you just can't go in from one country to another without difficulty. And even the poorest countries sometimes have these visas to get in. So nation states require, I think, to preserve their nationhood in a way, some kind of restriction about people coming in and leaving. And I think that's pretty much a universal arrangement. Now, whether that's good or bad, or whether nation states are good or bad, is a whole nother issue. But certainly, if the U.S. cannot preserve its border, you'd have to say it goes down a peg or two on nation-state issues. And just to talk about it, normally what a nation-state would do, it would have an immigration policy in place that in some ways was in the nation-state's interest, self-interest, and the inhabitants of that nation-state would say, well, yes, we'll allow this arrangement that seems reasonable to us, and we particularly want an arrangement that was beneficial to the indigenous inhabitants. And so often the way that you can do this, if you bring a lot of money in, you can buy your entrance into let's say Singapore, if you wanted to live there, or Australia, it might be a pretty good place, or Western European countries. I'm just buying my way in. Portugal, possibly. I'm going to bring in $1 million or whatever the number is. I'll invest it. I'll do this. I'll do that, and I will therefore benefit that country. The other thing that happens is that if you have a skill that the people would say, well, we really need more nuclear scientists or engineers and we'll allow you to come in and participate in our society. And some of the differences that I think this brings up is you touched, which we both have spoken about, the city on the hill, the sort of special American exceptionalism, the special role that our country has in the world, which is still a lifeboat in a troubled sea. We have special responsibilities to the world, okay. So one thing that happens is to recognize that we're a nice, kind place, and that if you happen to be a person that's arrived, if you're a nuclear engineer or whatever we need, or you had put money here, and you have relatives that are out there that might also wish to come in, then we'll arrange for them to come in also, even though it might not necessarily be something that the country bargained for. So relatives can come in, okay, and that's just the kind of nice people we are. And maybe the nuclear scientist will do better if his mother is there with him. I mean, it would be happy and maybe it'd be more productive. So there are arguments about that. And indeed, maybe a group of people from other places will, quote, enrich the country. Okay. So the other issue that would be out there would be you can come here on the same line of thinking if you are really you're from a place where you're being injured, and we're going to let anybody into the country if you can say that your situation elsewhere is not a good one, and we'll do this no matter what our self-interest is. So we're going to put aside whatever we perceive as our self-interest to allow people to come in, not just because we're a kind, nice place, and we don't want human suffering to be there, and so okay. And that seems to be the way that most people are presenting themselves to the border if they present themselves. So they say, well, I'm here because which would be reasonable. I live in Tegucigalpa in Honduras, and their gangs just terrorize me, and I'm just frightened to go out at night, and it's just a terrible place to live because of my fear for my life. Or my husband is beating me up. I have a terrible husband, and and I fear for my life, and I don't like this. But so, and also the argument can be made: I'm starving. It's impossible for me to live, but there's no food, and please help me. And I would say initially, this kind of concept was not so much ingrained in the American psyche, but what put it there was the Nazi treatment of Jewish people, and that's a famous. I think when immigration starts out, the first thing that's said is more or less this American exclusion, and selfishly, and the idea is in the nation's self-interest, they thought, well, all these Jewish people that are going to gas chambers, well, okay, we take that. But the only thing we care about is our deal, and we've decided we want a homogeneous nation, and we don't like people to come in from it. And so, in a way, it was said that really the U.S. is in some ways responsible for the Holocaust. In a way, and so people, their families been aggrieved or whatever, they certainly or want that policy reversed. So many people say, well, certainly that would be a reasonable thing to come into the country. So having said all those things, the U.S. has besides that, the immigration policy is out there where there's lots of people there have in some ways some kind of quotas that were there, and back for legal immigration and back in the day, I would say before 1965, the way these quotas were put there for legal immigration would be this is based on the genetic makeup of American citizens. So we have, I don't know what, what percentage of people are here from Norway. Well, they're going to get a good quota. But if you're from the Sudan, less so. In fact, you might even not have a quota. So the idea is to the diversity of having many people from everywhere in the country will basically be in the self-interest of the country. So this is, in other words, if we had a totally homogeneous European country or whatever, or a European descent, that would not be in people's best interest, and you could go through the reasoning for that. But okay, so that would be part of the immigration policy. Well, you could say whether these immigration policies are right or wrong. That seems to be what's there, and the system is if there are millions and millions of people, billions. In fact, that's a world crisis story here. One of the huge world events taking place is that we have 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion. And more or less, I'll pick a number out. You can throw Western Europe and maybe Japan, maybe some places in. Maybe you could get up to the place that 10% of the world is a good economic arrangement, so that if you live in one of those favored countries, and there are other countries that are people want to live in as well, like Sweden might be good, or I don't know, wherever. Spain, I mean, many countries that people might want to live in. And the situation is just much better. The general standard of living is better, the social services are better, the healthcare system is better. There is an arrangement in the country so that there's an ability to keep people out of the bad circumstances. So you live there, you're going to get a check from somebody for many reasons. The school system will look after you. Well, all right. So all of those attractions mean that millions of people would like to come into the country. And on the southern border, millions of people want to come in, and they say, and they have lawyers, they have all kinds of things, whatever. Let's see if we can get in. And then we get into the political issue, or some of what the nation, what people want in the nation. And I would say a substantial number of people don't like the idea of 19th century America, and for good reason, that we don't like a country where, the people that came over on the Mayflower running the place. And the way that we can change that arrangement would be at the ballot box. And if millions of, and I would we sort of touched on this, the political parties, the Democratic Party is going to depend on this demographic change for many reasons, because their policies are going to obviously, because they're tilted for many redistribution of wealth, I would modestly say diminishing the influence of the Mayflower gang, so to speak, and opening doors and just smoothing a transformation of the country. The more people that come in, so much the better. And that's sort of the legal thing that's out there. And then we get into the illegal situation. So it could be possible to actually do something. It would be pretty difficult, but it would be possible to put a check on immigration coming to the country, and probably it's not politically possible to do it, but maybe. And former President Trump said, let's build a wall, let's stop the border from happening. We have all these arrangements to stop illegal immigration. Not legal, but just illegal. So if people could come in and they say justifiably, I'm from Honduras, and I am being threatened by a gang there, and here the drug people are after me. I turn them in, and they shot up the house, and they killed my child, and they'll kill me next. And okay, so we'll get you in the country. You're not on the list, but there's a portal to come in, but that still leaves out millions of people that presumably could cross into the border illegally, and it also, these people that are coming in for many reasons, not only the southern border, but overstaying their visa arrangements, that may be even more of a way to get in the country. So, okay, there's a tremendous thousands of people, millions of people are coming in, and millions more on the way. And the Democratic Party is in power right now, and it's ultimately, in my opinion, going to be in their best interest to get these future supporters in the country so they can, and rightly or wrongly, make sure their policies govern the country.
Well, you keep on hanging this around the Democrats' head, but tell me, other than Trump promising a wall that he ultimately did not deliver on, can you name any serious Republican movement in the last 20 years towards a serious policing of the border against illegal immigration?
Well, happily I can, and it's the Ronald, which I'll get to that in 1 second. I'm just about to finish my little dissertation on illegal immigration, and then I'll talk about failed policies in the past. So one of the issues with the illegal immigration is the idea that if you cross into the country and you need to have somewhere where you can have sanctuary, and thus sanctuary cities have sprung up across the nation. And in these sanctuary cities, the Democratic-controlled cities, I have to say that. I mean, I want to keep saying this, and I'll push it a little bit. This is a major part of ultimate Democratic Party policy. Now, it's not to say the Republicans are without sin. We can talk about many bad things they do and whatever. And you could even say maybe this is good. Maybe it is good for thousands. I mean, it could be. But that's just what's happening. And so in the Democratic-controlled large cities, sanctuaries happened. And then there was kind of a critical point where if you're from Honduras and you cross the border, and if you were going into, let's say, I don't know, Sweden, if you happen to go into a monolithic place, you would be immediately, it would be very difficult. But if your mother-in-law lives in Chicago, and you can get to Chicago, a whole infrastructure is there to help you, and so we're past the critical point that there's no way, pretty much no way, that the illegal immigration is unstoppable because of the infrastructure that's been created, particularly in large cities. It's unstoppable, and the only way to stop it would be to be really mean. And if the sort of city on the hill concept of the country is, we don't really injure people that we can't imagine we're sending people back, and indeed, the dreamers exist. So besides that, I mean, you could be an illegal immigrant, and all kinds of things are possible once you're here. So, for instance, you could go to California and get a driver's license. In fact, that's they tell me a rather common story. Is that once you could go to California as an illegal immigrant, get a driver's license, and then with that sort of pass into the country. So these mechanisms are there, and it really, I think this is an issue of substantial consequence. But I'll detour off my little epistle here to discuss some of the Republican things in the past, and I well remember the great Republican Ronald Reagan, that before everything had just sort of gotten in our present circumstance, the immigration across the border, there'd been a lot of immigration that had happened in the past, sort of from Mexico into the country. That's particularly true in World War II, when the doors were open, you could come in, you could do things, and seasonal workers would come in and they would do things. And then they were pretty much sent back. And it was rather difficult to do things. But immigrants had accumulated. And so I well remember this. This was maybe, when Ronald Reagan's the 1970s. And there were, at that point, pick your number, 2 million illegal immigrants in the country. We're going to legalize all of these people. If you're here, we're going to go through a Republican plan to do something about this. You're not illegal anymore. And then, along with that, we'll tighten the border, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And that particularly was an effort on the part of the Republicans to, at least if you call Reagan a Republican, to handle the issue. And in fact, that didn't happen.
Well, and also that was 40 years ago. And
Well,
I'm
you
talking-
just asked for an example.
No, I said the last 20 years.
Oh,
because,
I pardon.
because what we've got in the last 10 to 15 years is a hemorrhage compared to what we had in the 80s and 90s. And on top of that, the one example that you can cite me is the Republicans giving in and saying, all right, we'll try to police the borders, but we're also going to legalize the illegals that are here. Yes. That's not exactly the strong, stalwart sort of position that I hear you advocating today.
No,
and
you didn't
also
hear me advocate it. I'm just stating the facts.
Yeah.
I have no advocation. I'm just saying this seemed to be the facts.
But also, once again, you're dumping on the Democrats, but let's talk about the Republicans, especially the upper income level Republicans, the factory owners, the big business owners, who have offshored all of these jobs to the third world that are not coming back in order to increase their net profits of their corporations, while they're beggaring the blue collar worker. So, if the Democrats are adopting this immigration policy not for the benefit of the country as a whole, if there is such a thing, but for the benefit of the Democratic Party, these Republicans are embracing globalization and moving away from the nation state, not even for the benefit of their own party, but for the benefit of their individual pocketbooks, and thus dealing mortal wounds to the American dream, which was based on opportunity, which is now vanishing. So,
well,
this is a counterbalance.
Okay. I mean, there's plenty of sin to go around,
Indeed,
and we
there
can.
is,
And I think, I think this is quite true.
And I do think we ought to police our borders better.
Well,
that's how
I mean,
it
I'm not
started
even.
out.
I'm not even saying. I mean, you could make
I
the
think we
argument
should.
of the porous border. I mean,
I would argue that if there's a nation state, it's got to rest on one of three things. One of the two traditional notions that go all the way back to ancient Roman law, either common blood or common territory. And both of those are really outmoded today. The American civil religion, American identity has never really rested on common blood, and it certainly hasn't rested on common territory because of our long open borders with Canada and Mexico. Or the third one is the common ideology, and that's the idea of mutual tolerance, mutual respect for differing opinions, the work ethic, the rule of law, Republican government, and if you are going to see American nationhood continue in the future, I would argue it's got to be that. It can't be blood, and it can't be territory either. And the massive immigration from an immediate neighboring country that's not being policed in any meaningful sense poses a grave threat to that kind of nationalism.
well, there are many ways to go with our little conversation here. I'm going to sneeze. I've got a healthy sneeze. Okay, great. I hope I don't have coronavirus. But in any event, yes, there are many ways to discuss this. So, I think the point you're hitting on is the fact that capitalism or desire to protect and expand one's personal property is often against the common interest. I mean, so I think that's a fair assertion. You could say that.
It can be. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats, but when it's pushed to an extreme, it becomes malignant. After you have how many $1 billion in the bank does Elon Musk have? It's just a matter of keeping score beyond that. I don't see it does a valuable service once you get to a certain level.
Well, we're going to have to talk some more about this. I don't know if we have enough time to get into this particularly, but as we end, I will concede that and I think this is a common story, that people make use of illegal immigrants in their own self-interest, and they like the supply of illegal immigrants to do some things, but the things the illegal immigrants do are often not cutting edge. They're, less skilled jobs that are rapidly being replaced by many other arrangements. And you could say, well, all right, you're doing this, you're doing that for your own self-interest. But it's kind of a circuitous arrangement, and to make the point, I think you'd have to say that that within the ranks of the Republicans, there's a substantial number of people that want that open border there, and could be. They're a little restrained about what they do or don't say about it. But so there are beneficiaries for these arrangements, particularly anyone that employs unskilled labor. So, I mean, I think that's a fair statement.
And back in the 90s, weren't there several leading Republican figures who had au pairs off the books?
Of course.
And that became a huge...
Absolutely.
I forget who it was, but there are a couple of really big news items.
Well, I would say that though not, and we have to conclude here, but though not actively, in my opinion, encouraging illegal immigration. I don't know if any Republicans say this is great. I have a chicken processing plant, and I can really cut my costs by doing deals. I think that's totally true, but they're not particularly advocating. The circumstances are that in the country there are 20 or 30 million, millions and millions of people are coming in here, and human nature is to take advantage of it. All right, so I'll give you one last comment, and then we'll go to another session.
Well, I would say if you look at the Republicans' talk, it's cheap, and see what kind of genuine initiatives they have put on the table since the turn of the century to try to stem and police the border.
Okay, on that note, thank you. We'll talk some more about this.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.